The stage was set. The lights blazed down, casting a sharp glow over the sleek, modern studio. The air was thick with anticipation. This wasn't just another routine interview. This was a battle of intellects, a high-stakes conversation that had the power to shift public opinion. On one side sat Elon Musk, the billionaire visionary who had reshaped industries, from electric cars and space travel to artificial intelligence and global communication. He had built companies that defied the odds, challenged governments, and disrupted the status quo. But tonight, he wasn't in control. Tonight, he was in the hot seat. Facing him was Sophia Carter, one of America's most formidable journalists. Known for her razor-sharp questioning and ability to make even the most powerful figures squirm, she had spent years exposing contradictions and tearing apart empty rhetoric. She had no patience for evasive answers, and she had no intention of giving Musk an easy escape. The show's title, Truth Uncovered, glowed in bold letters behind them. The live audience, packed into the dimly lit rows, leaned forward in anticipation. They weren't just watching an interview, they were about to witness a clash of titans. Backstage, the producer gripped his headset, issuing rapid-fire instructions. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of expression. The countdown echoed through the studio. 3, 2, 1. Sophia picked up her notes, offering Musk a polite yet calculated smile. Elon Musk, thank you for being here. Musk smirked slightly, tilting his head. I have a feeling this conversation is going to be interesting. And just like that, the battle had begun. The tension in the studio thickened as Sophia Carter leaned forward, her sharp eyes locked onto Elon Musk. She wasn't here to exchange pleasantries, she was here to challenge him, to push him into a corner where he had no choice but to defend himself. Elon, you're a genius. A visionary. No one can deny that. Her voice was steady, authoritative. But then, with a calculated pause, she flipped through a thick stack of documents on the desk in front of her. But lately, people don't describe you that way anymore. She let the words hang in the air for a moment, then continued. Instead, they call you a troublemaker. Reckless. A man who breaks decades-old rules simply because you believe you're right. You fired thousands of employees after taking over Twitter. You've openly criticized some of the most powerful figures in the world. And many believe you're using your influence to manipulate public opinion for your own gain. She stopped, her gaze drilling into Musk. What do you have to say about that? The audience held their breath. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment when Musk would either defend himself or fold under pressure. Some expected him to launch into a justification, to soften the accusations. But he didn't do any of that. Instead, Musk did something no one saw coming. He tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing the question like an engineer dismantling a flawed equation. Then, rather than defending himself, he responded with a question of his own. Sophia, you said, people call me a troublemaker. But I have to ask, who exactly are these people you're referring to? For a brief second, the energy in the room shifted. Carter hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough for the audience to notice. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Musk had just flipped the script. Sophia quickly composed herself. She wasn't going to let him take control this early. I mean the public. The people who once admired you but are now questioning your true motives. Musk nodded slightly, his composure unshaken. The public? Or what they've been told to believe? Silence. This wasn't just an answer, it was a challenge. A challenge not just to Carter, but to the entire audience, forcing them to rethink everything they thought they knew. The studio had been Musk's battlefield before, but this was different. Sophia Carter wasn't just another journalist, she was one of the best. And she wasn't here to have a conversation, she was here to corner him, expose him, dismantle him in front of millions of viewers. But Musk had just done something no one expected. Instead of defending himself, instead of explaining away the accusations, he had asked a simple but devastating question. The public? Or what they've been told to believe? For a brief moment, the energy in the room shifted. Carter, known for her composure, hesitated, a fraction of a second, but enough for the audience to notice. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Musk hadn't just answered her, he had flipped the entire conversation on its head. Carter wasn't going to let him take control so easily. She straightened in her seat, regaining her footing. Her next move had to be stronger. Elon, don't tell me you're suggesting that some unseen force is controlling the information we receive. Her voice carried a trace of mockery, as if luring Musk into a trap. This was her specialty, framing the question in a way that would make Musk's response sound like a conspiracy theory. But Musk didn't take the bait. He leaned back slightly, his expression unshaken. Calm. Calculated. In control. I'm not suggesting anything, he said, his voice steady. I'm just asking questions. And I think that's something we all should be doing. The silence in the studio was different this time. It wasn't tension. It was realization. Carter knew she had to act fast. She glanced down at her stack of notes, flipping to a different page. If Musk was going to turn this into a debate about media influence, she needed to hit him with something stronger. All right then, she said, her voice regaining its sharp edge. Let's talk about what you've actually done. She held up a document. Since you took over Twitter, you made massive changes. Some say they were necessary reforms, but others claim you created chaos. A platform that once had clear moderation rules has now become a place where anyone can say anything. She locked eyes with him. Do you take responsibility for that? The audience leaned in. This was a direct hit. She had forced Musk into a corner where he had no choice but to either justify himself or admit fault. But Musk didn't flinch. He took a deep breath, then leaned forward, his voice calm but carrying undeniable weight. I believe in personal responsibility. I believe that people should have the right to determine what is true, rather than being forced to accept a single, controlled version of the truth. He paused, letting his words settle. Because history has taught us one undeniable lesson, when a small group controls the truth, it ceases to be the truth. It becomes power. A few audience members nodded. Others remained silent, processing what they had just heard. Carter realized something in that moment. Musk wasn't just answering questions. He was reshaping the entire debate. And if she didn't take control now, she was going to lose this battle. Sophia Carter knew she was losing control. She had come prepared. She had researched every angle, crafted every question to make sure Elon Musk had nowhere to run. She had faced world leaders, CEOs, and billionaires before. They all cracked eventually. But Musk wasn't playing by the usual rules. He wasn't on the defensive. He wasn't scrambling for excuses. Instead, he was turning every question back on her, back on the audience, back on the very foundation of the conversation itself. And people were listening. She had to hit harder. Carter exhaled sharply, then flipped to another page of her notes. Her voice, cool and calculated, cut through the tension. Let's talk about free speech, Elon. You claim to be a defender of free speech, yet you decide who gets to speak on your platform and who doesn't. The audience stirred. It was a sharp, direct accusation. You overhauled Twitter's moderation policies, fired thousands of employees, and changed how information spreads. So tell me, what makes you any different from the very people you criticize? She leaned in slightly, sensing the momentum shifting back to her. But Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he smirked. Sophia, you're right about one thing. I do have control over the platforms I own. Then, he paused, long enough for the weight of his words to settle in the room. The audience leaned forward. Carter didn't interrupt. Then, Musk leaned in, locking eyes with her. But here's the difference between me and them, they control what information you're allowed to see. Me? I simply give people the freedom to see everything, the things they agree with and the things they don't. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. The truth does not fear scrutiny, he added, his voice calm but firm. Only lies require censorship. The air in the studio changed. It was a statement so simple, yet so powerful, that it made people rethink their own assumptions. Carter knew she couldn't let this stand. She straightened up, tightening her grip on the table. "All right," she said, her voice sharper now. "Let's talk about the consequences of your actions." She flipped through her notes again, her tone slow, measured, deliberate. "Since you took over Twitter, misinformation has surged. Certain extremist groups now have a larger platform to amplify their views." She locked eyes with Musk. "Do you take responsibility for that?" The audience tensed. Another direct hit. Another moment of reckoning. But Musk remained completely still. He let a long silence fill the room. Not an awkward silence, a powerful one. One that made the audience lean in even further. Then, in a measured tone, he spoke. "Your question is built on a flawed assumption, Sophia." She blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Musk's voice remained calm, yet every word carried weight. "You assume that more voices being heard is inherently a bad thing." The studio was dead silent. "You speak of misinformation," he continued, "but who decides what is true and what is false? The government? The media? A select group of so-called experts?" Carter opened her mouth to respond, but Musk subtly raised his hand, not aggressively, but with quiet authority. She hesitated. "Let's look at history," Musk said, his voice deliberate. "How many times have we been told something was absolute truth, only to find out years later that it was completely false?" He leaned back, his tone turning colder. "We were once told that smoking was good for our health." The audience shifted. "We were told there was no need to worry about a financial crisis, right before it happened." Some people in the crowd nodded. Others looked uneasy. And how many other truths have been overturned over time? Musk let the question hang in the air. "I'm not saying misinformation doesn't exist," he said. "But the real question is, who gets to decide what truth is? And if you hand that power to a small group of elites, how can you be certain they won't abuse it?" The silence was heavy. Carter knew she had to strike now. If she hesitated, she would lose control of the conversation entirely. She squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and went in for her next attack. "Elon, you claim to be fighting for transparency." Her tone was sharper now, more aggressive. "But let's be honest, you're one of the most influential figures in the world. How can you be sure you're not manipulating public opinion for your own benefit?" The audience inhaled sharply. This was it. The moment that could put Musk on the defensive. But he didn't blink. Instead, he smiled, not out of arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of a man who had already anticipated this move. "Sophia," he said, his voice calm, "I'm not asking the public to believe me." Then, he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "I just want them to think for themselves." The silence in the room shifted again. Musk's voice dropped slightly, each word carrying undeniable weight. "If I'm wrong, prove me wrong with reason, not with censorship." Then, he turned toward the camera, addressing not just Sophia, but the millions of people watching at home. "Ask questions. Don't accept something just because it comes from a so-called trusted source. Seek the truth. Think for yourself." Then, the final blow. Because if you allow someone else to control your thoughts, you are no longer a free citizen. You are merely a puppet. Carter clenched her jaw. She could feel the momentum slipping away. But she refused to let the debate end like this. She had one last card to play. Taking a deep breath, she delivered her final strike, her voice sharp as a blade. Elon, you're painting a deeply cynical picture of the world. But if everything is as bad as you claim, if power is truly being manipulated as you say, then the real question is, do we still have hope? The entire studio held its breath. This was no longer just an interview. This was a conversation that could change the way people saw the world. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted. What started as a battle of words was no longer just a debate between Sophia Carter and Elon Musk. It had become something much bigger, a conversation about power, control, and the future of truth itself. But Carter wasn't done. She had one last, devastating card to play. She sat up straight, her eyes locked onto Musk. Her voice, no longer just sharp, carried something deeper, a challenge that couldn't be ignored. Elon, you've spent this entire conversation warning us about the dangers of manipulated power, about how a small group of elites can control information and decide what we should believe. She paused, letting the tension build. But have you ever stopped to consider that you, Elon Musk, might be becoming the very thing you fear? The room went still. Some audience members sat up straighter. Others exchanged glances. No one dared to make a sound. Carter leaned in, pressing her advantage. You own Tesla, the company that is redefining global transportation. You own SpaceX, the company pushing humanity toward the stars. You own Starlink, which controls global internet access in ways no single government ever has. And now, you own X, one of the world's most powerful social media platforms. She let the weight of those names hang in the air. Then, with deliberate precision, she asked the one question Musk couldn't evade. Who holds you accountable? The audience inhaled sharply. And if one day you change, if one day you become the very force you claim to fight against, who will stop you? This was it. The checkmate moment. Sophia Carter had thrown every challenging question she had. And now, she had hit him where no one had dared before. Musk didn't respond right away. He didn't smirk. He didn't scoff. He simply sat there, staring back at Carter, his expression unreadable. For the first time in the entire interview, the silence felt different. Not a silence of hesitation, but one of deep contemplation. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Musk leaned back in his chair, slowly laced his fingers together, and in a voice quieter than before, but heavier with meaning, he responded. Sophia, that is a very good question. Another pause. And it's one that I ask myself every single day. Carter blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Not because she doubted his words, but because she never expected him to admit it. But Musk wasn't finished. He sat forward slightly, his voice steady, his gaze sharp as steel. I am not perfect. I don't have all the answers. But there is one thing I do know. The difference between someone who protects the truth and someone who abuses power is not how much power they have, it's whether they allow others to question them. The audience stilled. The day I stop allowing people to challenge me, the day I use my influence to silence those who disagree with me, that is the day I will have become what I once warned against. Another heavy pause. Sophia Carter, a journalist who had built her career on breaking down the powerful, sat in silence. Not because she had lost, but because she had realized something. Musk's answer wasn't a defense. It was a warning. Not just for himself. For everyone. This wasn't just about Elon Musk anymore. This was about anyone in power. Any government. Any media organization. Any tech giant. And even the people watching at home. What happens when those in power stop allowing themselves to be questioned? The realization hung in the air like a storm cloud. For the first time, this wasn't just a debate. This was a conversation about the future of power itself. And everyone in that studio, including Sophia Carter, understood. This wasn't the end of the discussion. This was just the beginning. The tension in the studio was almost palpable. This wasn't just another high-profile interview. Something had shifted. For the past hour, Sophia Carter had pushed Elon Musk with every sharp-edged question in her arsenal. She had challenged his decisions, accused him of manipulating the public, and even asked him if he was becoming the very thing he warned against. But Musk had never flinched. He had countered with questions of his own, turning the conversation upside down. And now, in a moment of pure honesty, he had admitted something few in power ever would. I ask myself every single day if I am becoming what I fear. The audience wasn't just watching anymore. They were thinking. Carter, for all her sharpness, knew what had just happened. This wasn't about winning an argument anymore. This was about something bigger. She took a deep breath, then sat back in her chair. For the first time in the entire interview, her voice wasn't cutting, it was reflective. Elon, it seems that tonight, we didn't just have an interview. She glanced at the audience, scanning their faces, some thoughtful, some shaken, some deep in contemplation. Perhaps this is a conversation we all need to reflect on for a long time. Musk nodded slightly but remained silent. Carter placed her pen down on the desk. The aggressiveness in her posture had softened, replaced by something else, a quiet realization. Then, she turned toward the camera. Tonight, I asked Elon Musk many questions. But maybe the most important question didn't come from me. She let the moment breathe. Maybe it comes from you. The studio fell into complete silence. The weight of what had just unfolded settled in, not just on the stage, but among the millions watching at home. Carter's voice lowered, carrying a quiet intensity. We live in a world where information reaches us every second of every day. But how much of it is the truth? And how much of it is simply what someone wants us to believe? She turned back to Musk, then hesitated before speaking again. I am not saying that everything you said tonight is right. A small knowing smile played on her lips before she added. But I also can't say that it's wrong. The audience exhaled collectively, not because the debate had ended, but because it had transformed into something else entirely. Carter looked back into the camera, her final words carrying more weight than any debate ever could. So now, I leave this question with you, not just as viewers of this program, but as citizens of this world. She leaned slightly forward, her gaze unshakable. Are you willing to ask your own questions? Are you willing to seek the truth for yourself, rather than letting someone else decide it for you? The studio remained still, as if even the cameras themselves were holding their breath. This wasn't just television. This was a wake-up call. As the studio lights cast a final glow over the stage, Sophia Carter sat still, her fingers resting lightly on the table. For the first time in her career, she wasn't thinking about the next question. She wasn't preparing a final counterpoint or crafting a sharp-edged follow-up attack. Because tonight's conversation had stopped being a debate a long time ago. This wasn't about who won or who lost. This was about something much bigger. She turned her gaze toward Elon Musk, who remained seated across from her, his expression unreadable. He wasn't celebrating a victory. He wasn't basking in the moment. He was waiting. Waiting to see what came next. Carter took a deep breath, then turned toward the camera. Tonight, we didn't just hear opinions. We heard something far more important, questions. The audience wasn't just listening anymore. They were thinking. Sophia knew what had happened here. Elon Musk hadn't come to defend himself. He hadn't come to persuade people to believe in him. He had come to challenge how they think altogether. She leaned slightly forward, her voice lower now, more personal. We often take information at face value. We assume that the voices we trust are telling us the full story. We accept what we are given, without always stopping to ask. She paused, letting the moment stretch. Who is deciding what we believe? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Who benefits from controlling the truth? The energy in the studio had changed. This wasn't just another viral interview. This was a wake-up call. Carter let out a small breath, glancing back at Musk. For the first time, she allowed herself a faint smile, not of defeat, not of agreement, but of acknowledgement. Elon, I am not saying that everything you said tonight is right. Another pause. But I also cannot say that it's wrong. The weight of those words hung in the air. Musk gave a small nod, his expression thoughtful. But he said nothing. Because he didn't have to. Carter turned back to the camera, locking eyes with the millions watching at home. So now, the question is not for Elon Musk. It's for you. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the soft hum of the cameras rolling. Are you willing to ask your own questions? Are you willing to search for the truth, instead of letting someone else decide it for you? Her words weren't a statement. They were a challenge. The audience sat motionless. The weight of her words pressed down on them. This wasn't a conversation that would end when the cameras shut off. This was a conversation that would continue long after the credits rolled. Because the truth is not something that is handed to you. It's something you must seek for yourself. The cameras were still rolling, but the interview had already transcended the usual format of a debate. This wasn't just another high-profile clash between a journalist and a billionaire. It wasn't about headlines, viral moments, or who came out on top. This was about something deeper. Sophia Carter sat motionless for a moment, her fingers lightly resting on the desk. She wasn't just reflecting on what had been said, she was absorbing it. For the first time in a long time, she had walked into an interview expecting one outcome, and left with something entirely different. She turned back to Elon Musk, who remained composed, watching, not as a man who had won a debate, but as someone who had planted a thought in the minds of millions. Sophia took a slow breath, then faced the camera. This conversation does not end here. She let those words sit in the air, heavy with meaning. We live in a world where information reaches us every second of every day. News, social media, expert opinions, it's all coming at us, all the time. But how much of it is the truth? And how much of it is just what someone wants us to believe? The audience wasn't just watching anymore. They were thinking. Carter leaned in slightly, her voice carrying a new weight. Are you asking yourself the right questions? She let her eyes scan the room, the audience sitting on the edge of their seats. Are you searching for truth, or are you just accepting what is placed in front of you? This wasn't about Elon Musk anymore. This was about every single person watching. She turned back to him, hesitating for the first time. Then, finally, she gave a small, knowing nod. I'm not saying everything you've said tonight is right. A pause. But I also can't say that it's wrong. Musk didn't smirk. He didn't celebrate. He just waited. Because he knew, this was bigger than him. Carter sat back in her chair, exhaling slowly. So, I leave this question with you, not as viewers of this program, but as citizens of this world. She turned her eyes toward the camera, locking in with the millions of people watching at home. When this program ends, will you go back to your daily life, accepting whatever is placed in front of you? Or will you start asking questions? The air in the studio felt thicker. Sophia Carter, one of the most unshakable interviewers in journalism, wasn't just speaking to an audience anymore. She was challenging them. I am not asking you to believe me. She shook her head slightly. I am not asking you to believe Elon Musk. Another pause. I am simply asking you to start thinking for yourself. The silence in the room was deafening. Not a single person moved. Because this wasn't the end of the conversation. This was just the beginning. The studio lights dimmed, but the weight of the discussion remained. Elon Musk slowly stood up, adjusting his jacket, preparing to leave. But before he walked away, he turned toward Sophia Carter, just for a brief moment. There was no animosity in his eyes. No smugness. No sense of victory. Just acknowledgement. And for the first time that night, Carter nodded back. Not in agreement. Not in surrender. But in recognition of something far bigger than the two of them. This hadn't been a battle. This had been a reckoning. A challenge, not between two individuals, but between power and truth, control and free thought, comfort and questioning. As Musk walked off stage, the audience remained still. No applause. No murmurs. Just reflection. Because the conversation hadn't ended when the cameras turned off. It had only just begun. And as Sophia Carter finally looked back toward the camera one last time, she knew, this wouldn't be the last time these questions were asked. Because once you start questioning the world around you, you can never go back. The screen faded to black, but the conversation refused to end. Some debates fade with time, this one wouldn't. Because this wasn't just about Elon Musk. It wasn't just about Sophia Carter. It was about every single person watching. A voice emerged over the darkness, steady, calm, and inviting. This conversation does not end here. It has only just begun. A pause, just long enough for the weight of that truth to settle. How do you feel about what just happened? Leave a comment below. I truly want to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with Elon Musk? Or do you believe the truth is more complicated? Another pause, closer now, more personal. And if this conversation made you think, hit like. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because this is just the beginning. A slight, unseen smile felt through the words. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this dialogue. I'll see you in the next video. The screen went black. But the conversation? It continued. This wasn't just a debate. It wasn't about who was right or wrong. It was a wake-up call. The conversation between Elon Musk and Sophia Carter revealed something bigger than any single argument. It exposed a truth we often ignore. The power to shape reality lies in the hands of those who control information. We live in a world where news, social media, and institutions tell us what to believe. But how often do we stop and question it? How often do we ask ourselves, who benefits from this narrative? Who decides what is true? Musk didn't tell people what to think, he challenged them to think for themselves. He reminded us that truth does not fear scrutiny. Only lies need censorship. But this isn't about Elon Musk. It's not about Sophia Carter. It's about you. Are you willing to ask the hard questions? Are you willing to search for truth instead of passively accepting what you're given? Because at the end of the day, the most dangerous thing is not misinformation. It's the failure to think for yourself.